in an ordinary busy marketplace in Gaborone, Botswana. Within the noise of vendors shouting, and the aroma of roasted maize, Kabo was lost in his thoughts. Life had not been kind to him lately, his small carpentry business was failing, and he was struggling to make ends meet. All he could afford today was to walk around the market, observing people and wondering how his life had run so far out of control. As he passed a fruit store, something unusual caught his eye. Tucked between a pile of old books and newspapers was a crumpled, yellowed envelope. It looked as if it had been there for ages, forgotten by time. Curious, Kabo picked it up. His fingers traced the faded ink. There was no address, just a simple name written on the front, Naledi. Interested, he slid the letter out. The handwriting inside was beautiful, filled with emotion. The words told a heartbreaking story of a deep, forbidden love. The writer, a man named Thuto, had poured his heart out to Naledi, confessing a love that had defied their family's wishes. It was a letter written with hope, but it seemed to end unexpectedly with a promise: "I will wait for you, no matter how long it takes." Kabo's heart raced as he read the letter. Who was Naledi? Why had this letter never reached her? As he folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope, something inside him stirred, a strange urge to uncover the story behind it. He felt like this letter had found its way to him for a reason. He asked around the market, showing the envelope to the older vendors, hoping someone would remember Naledi or Thuto. A few elderly women nodded, their faces clouding with recognition, but no one could give him solid information. However, one old vendor, an herbalist with a wrinkled face and piercing eyes, whispered, "Naledi, that name brings back old memories. She was a beauty, loved by all, but she disappeared many years ago." Disappeared? Kabo asked, his curiosity deepening. "They say she ran away with a lover, but no one ever saw her again." "It was like she vanished into thin air," the herbalist said, her voice low, almost as if she feared speaking the name aloud. Kabo felt a chill run down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that this letter was connected to something much larger. The story of Naledi and Thuto was buried deep in the past, but it was calling out to him. Determined to find out more, Kabo decided to visit the village mentioned in the letter, Molepolo, just a few hours away from Gaborone. The journey was long, but Kabo felt a strange sense of urgency pulling him forward. When he arrived, the village was quiet, nestled in the hills, its red dirt roads lined with acacia trees. He asked around, showing the letter to anyone who would listen. Most people nodded, but an old woman sitting under a baobab tree gave him a knowing look. "You're looking for Naledi, aren't you?" she asked in a gravelly voice. "You won't find her. Not unless you're willing to face the truth." Kabo's heart pounded. What truth? What happened to her? The woman stared at him for a long moment before answering. Naledi was never meant to be found. She and Thuto were cursed for their love. The families they defied were powerful. People with secrets they didn't want revealed. Kabo's blood ran cold, but he was too deep into this mystery to stop now. He thanked the woman and followed her mysterious advice to a secluded part of the village, a long-forgotten graveyard, overgrown with weeds and moss. As he walked among the crumbling tombstones, a chilling wind swept through the air. Kabo's heart raced as he searched, and then he saw it, a small, weathered stone with the name Naledi carved into it. Next to it, a fresh bouquet of wildflowers lay at the base of the grave. Someone had been here recently. Before Kabo could react, a voice behind him whispered, "You shouldn't have come." He turned sharply to see a man, tall and gaunt, standing in the shadows. His face was half hidden, but there was something familiar about him. The man stepped forward, his eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and anger. "I am Thuto," he said in a low voice, his eyes locking onto Kabo's. "I waited for her, just like I promised. But Naledi, she was taken from me." Kabo's breath caught in his throat. "Taken? By who?" "By forces you cannot understand," Thuto replied. "Her family, they dabbled in dark things. They didn't want her to live, so they cursed her. She was trapped between worlds, never to return to me." Kabo felt a wave of fear wash over him. "But, this letter? I found it in the marketplace. Why now?" Thuto's eyes darkened. "Because the curse is breaking. Naledi's spirit is restless. She wants to be free, but her family's secret, it's still buried, and it's dangerous." Before Kabo could ask more, the wind howled, and the ground beneath Naledi's grave began to tremble. The earth cracked open, revealing an ancient chest buried deep within. Thuto stared at it, his hands shaking. "Inside that chest is the truth," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "But once it's opened, there's no going back." Kabo hesitated for a moment before kneeling down and pulling the chest from the earth. His hands shook as he opened it, revealing a collection of old papers, letters, and a single photograph. It was Naledi, smiling, her eyes filled with love and fear. Beside her stood a man dressed in ceremonial robes, a man Kabo recognized from stories, Naledi's father, a powerful traditional healer known for dark magic. Suddenly, a deep rumbling echoed through the graveyard, and the sky darkened. Kabo's heart raced as he realized he had uncovered something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The ground shook violently, and from the shadows, figures began to emerge, dark, twisted shapes with glowing eyes, drawn to the uncovered chest. Thuto grabbed Kabo's arm. "Run! You've released them." Kabo barely had time to think before they both sprinted through the graveyard, the dark figures chasing them. As they ran, Kabo could feel the air growing colder, the presence of something ancient and evil closing in. They made it back to the village just as the sun began to rise, and the dark demons faded into the shadows. Kabo, breathless and shaken, looked at Thuto. "What was that?" he gasped. "That," Thuto said firmly, "was the price of uncovering the truth. Naledi's family never wanted their secret revealed, and now they would do anything to keep it buried." "What is this family secret?" Kabo asked with fear in his voice. Naledi's family's secret was that they had dabbled in dark magic and ancient rituals, which they used to control and manipulate their own destiny. Her father, a powerful traditional healer, was known for using these dark arts not just to heal but to curse and bind. When Naledi fell in love with Thuto against her family's wishes, they feared losing control over her. To prevent her from leaving, they cast a curse on her, trapping her spirit between worlds. The family didn't want anyone to know about their dark practices because it would tarnish their reputation and reveal the sinister means they used to maintain power in the community. Naledi's disappearance was part of the curse. They condemned her to an existence where she could neither live freely with Thuto nor completely pass on to the afterlife. This curse and the family's use of forbidden magic were buried deep in the past, hidden away so that no one could uncover the truth. The letter Kabo found was the key to unearthing this secret, and by doing so, he disrupted the dark forces that had kept Naledi's spirit bound for so many years. Kabo and Thuto stood in silence, hearts still racing from their escape. The air was thick with the sense that something had shifted. The ground beneath the old graveyard was still trembling, and Kabo could feel it, something was coming. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind swept through the village. From the shadows, a figure slowly began to take form, a glowing, ethereal presence. Kabo's eyes widened in disbelief as Naledi's ghost appeared before them. She was just as the photograph had shown her, beautiful, with a soft, sorrowful smile. Thuto's breath caught in his throat. "Naledi," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. His hands reached out toward her, but his fingers passed through her form like mist. Naledi looked at Thuto with love and sadness in her eyes. "I have waited for this moment," she said, her voice soft and echoing like a distant melody. "I could never come back to you because of my family's curse. But now, the secret is out." Kabo, standing just behind Thuto, watched as Naledi's ghostly form turned toward him. Her eyes seemed to pierce his soul. "Thank you for finding the letter," she said, her voice carrying the weight of years of untold suffering. "You have freed me from my family's curse, and for that you shall be rewarded." Before Kabo could react, Naledi raised her hand, and a warm, golden light surrounded him. In an instant, he felt a surge of energy, his worries about his failing business and his hardships melting away. He could feel it deep in his bones, the gift. A blessing. Suddenly, a small pouch appeared in his hand, filled with shimmering gold coins. "This is my gift to you," Naledi said. "You will no longer suffer in poverty. The wealth of my family, buried with their secrets, is now yours. Use it wisely." Kabo could barely speak, overwhelmed by what had just happened. He felt tears prick his eyes as he realized how his life had changed in an instant. Then, Naledi turned back to Thuto. Her eyes softened, and she reached out to touch his face, though her hand passed through him. "Thuto," she whispered, "you waited for me, just like you promised. But now, it's time for you to let go. I am free." Tears streamed down Thuto's face as he looked at her, his heart breaking all over again. "I never stopped loving you," he said. "I know," Naledi replied. "And that love saved me. But now, I must go. You need to live, to be at peace." As her ghost began to fade, a gentle breeze swept through the village, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers. Naledi's presence lingered for just a moment longer, her eyes locking with Thuto's one final time before she disappeared completely, her spirit finally at rest. Thuto stood still, his heart heavy yet filled with a strange sense of relief. "She's gone," he whispered, wiping his eyes. "She's finally free." Kabo, still clutching the pouch of gold, felt a mix of emotions, gratitude, awe, and fear. He had uncovered a terrible family secret, but in doing so, he had also brought peace to two souls that had been separated for far too long. As the village stirred awake, life continued, but Kabo knew that he had been changed forever. He looked down at the grave, then at Thuto, and nodded. "It's over," he said quietly. "But we'll never forget." With one last glance at the old graveyard, Kabo turned and walked away, knowing that the letter, the curse, and the love story had all been laid to rest. And as the sun rose higher in the sky, a calm settled over the village, and the memory of Naledi and Thuto faded into legend, their story told in whispers to those who dared to listen.